it's not often on the Ruthless Variety program that we have a guest as distinguished as we do here today. We have a judge, a real one, not a Michael one.
Yeah.
We have a real one.
Yeah.
Amul Thapar, Judge Amul Thapar. Thank you for coming.
Well, thank you for having me, and I don't know about as distinguished. I think most of your guests are more distinguished, especially the animal segments. Come on. When you talk about the animals, I mean, they definitely trump me. In fact, my dog makes an appearance in the acknowledgments of the book for putting up with me. So I got an animal reference in.
Guys.
Well, you're a great guy. We've known you for years. You're a friend of the program.
Yes.
And you're an appeals court judge. Many of you probably heard his name for the first time when you were on the short list for the Supreme Court.
Yeah, that was quite an honor to be on the short list for the Supreme Court, get to meet with the president. I mean, think about it. For all your listeners, my dad came to this country with a one-way ticket and a $5 bill.
Oh, man.
And became a citizen here. Raised two kids. My sister, who's the crown jewel of the family, anyone that's Indian knows.
She's a doctor?
She's a doctor. Yes, of course. When I called my dad and told him I was going to law school, Smug will appreciate this. He said, "Why would you go to grad school to work an hourly job?" And then when I told him I was going to go clerk after law school, he said, "Were you a failure in law school? You're going to go clerk? You're not even going to be a lawyer?"
It's so good. Well, typically we have a one conservative Indian limit here on the program, but
we extended it.
We'll make the exception here. No, listen, thank you for doing this. You've brought us a couple of tributes. The first is this bourbon we've got to talk about, because this looks like a special deal.
This is incredible. So Boone County Bourbon is a relatively new distillery. In fact, it's 7 years old, and you've got one of the very first bottles of their 7-year bourbon. Wow. It's in northern Kentucky. And here's how good it is, which I didn't tell you guys before, is you all know who Steph Curry is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Absolutely.
He's a bourbon aficionado like you guys. In fact, you should have him on the show. And
we'd do it in a second. I'm not sure he would.
Yeah.
And he is coming out with a bourbon, and he tasted a bunch of bourbons, and he picked Boone County.
Really?
So Boone County's going to make his bourbon. If Ashbrook was in here instead of deserting his fellow Ohioan, I would tell him that if you guys will bring the show to Cincinnati, Ashbrook and I can go to the Reds game. You guys can put up with us. We can play some golf. We can arrange some bourbon tastings, and then you can go to Boone County Distillery.
I mean, this is, Lee, let's get this on the calendar.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Count
Get
me
on the
in.
books.
Let's at Cincinnati at a time of your choosing. We'll
We can have that chili with spaghetti, right? That's the big thing.
Yeah, Skyline.
chili with spaghetti. An insult to the Italian community.
It's awesome. Come on. Skyline chili? Are you kidding? Let me tout more Cincinnati things. I got the Bengals and Reds in already.
Yeah, no, you're just going to run right down the line.
Yeah, I am going to run down the line.
Well, it's a great place. I'm sorry about Ashbrook's disappearance. I think it's, it's disrespectful for starters.
Yeah, the Indian came in. What's up with the Cincinnatian?
I love it. Listen, now we got to talk about this book, because this is one that everybody needs to buy. It is incredible. It's called The People's Justice, Clarence Thomas, and the Constitutional Stories That Define Him. Let's talk about why you wanted to do this book first, and then we can talk about some of the contents.
Yeah, so Justice Scalia, before he sadly passed, talked about our obligation to fly the flag. Why? Because everyone in the academy isn't flying the flag. Most people aren't talking about originalism. Justice Scalia took originalism to lawyers and judges, and he always said, and you'll like this, another animal reference, he said, when he would mention originalism, everyone would run out of the room like he was a bear. And he changed that. And he talked about our obligation to carry forward that legacy. And to me, the most important thing, and what I hope this book does, is it takes originalism to the American people. It's not written for lawyers exclusively. It's for lawyers because they'll learn a lot in it. But it's for the American people. And as the publisher said in the sleeve, even the critics of Justice Thomas might be surprised by what they find in this book, because originalism reflects the will of the American people. The best way to explain it. So Dean Reuter, a friend of mine, asked me, why'd I write this book? Well, my neighbor, who's a dear friend, as you guys know, a really good golfer, by the way, a scratch golfer, and he thinks differently than me. And when I was mentioned for the Supreme Court, people said I was an originalist. And he came down, our backyard's adjoined. He came down and he said, you're one of those? You're one of those?
Like the head above the fence, like Home Improvement?
Yes, yeah, exactly. And he came down and said that. And I said, Mike, let me explain something to you. If you're a businessman, if you sign a contract with someone else and you have a dispute over the contract, should I figure out what the words in that document, what you all meant them to mean? Or should I just tell you what's best for you because I'm a judge and impose my views on you? And he looked at me, he said, of course you got to figure out what I meant. Are you kidding? Judges should never do that.
He said, welcome to the Federalist Society.
That's right. I said, you too are now an originalist. And he went running back like I was a bear.
Yeah. I love that. I love it. Well, what I really love about this is that you take, I think a lot of misconceptions about Justice Thomas in a legal context and explain it in a way that guys like us can understand, which is really important because, look, if you hang out with a bunch of Federalist Society people, which I do, guilty, often it gets very weedy. And non-lawyers like myself, I struggle to keep up with exactly what we're talking about here. This book does that in a way that I can understand, which is just fabulous.
Yeah, I tried to capture the real stories of real people because what often is forgotten when we're talking about these cases is they involve real people. Mm-hmm. And these people are suffering sometimes through human tragedy. I mean, one of the chapters captures Warwick Dunn, the NFL running back, struggled to cope with the murder of his mom and the raising of his siblings. Mm-hmm. And it parallels that against the killer's quest to get off death row and get out of the crime he was responsible for, ambushing Warwick Dunn's mom. Mm-hmm. And what I tried to do is capture what the litigants were going through. Mm-hmm. And I tried to show that Justice Thomas, if you meet Justice Thomas, you're the most important person in the room.
That's quite a skill.
And maybe the introduction, I'll give this away, the book starts with a story that Nicole Garnett, one of his clerks, told me. He was walking out of church one day with a few of his clerks, and a homeless man came running up to him and said, Justice, Justice, I've got a petition for you. And the clerks braced, and they thought of grabbing and getting in front of the justice. And the justice shooed him away and walked over and had a conversation, and they could see the man was animated. And when he came back to them, he said, these are hard days for him. And they looked at the justice, and he revealed to them that the homeless man used to be a drug addict, and that's why he was homeless. Because his mom, he had a falling out with his mom as a result of his drug addiction. And 2 years before, the justice had counseled him and worked with him to get rid of his addiction so that he, the homeless man, could reconcile with his mom. And he had reconciled with his mom, and she had sadly passed.
Oh, man.
And he wanted to let the justice know.
Man, that's just unbelievable. It goes right to the heart of the man, right?
Yeah, that's what he is, the people's justice. Why? For 3 reasons. One, he loves the American people. He truly does. He travels around in an RV, doesn't tell people who he is, hangs out in Walmart parking lots. I don't know about that choice, but, everyone chooses where to hang out. He cares passionately about people, and then his jurisprudence reflects the will of the people. But not only that, what I found in studying his jurisprudence, because he is the ultimate originalist, and I think we all agree with that, is that every case he talks directly to the American people. He says, why use a $20 word when a $2 word would do? Mm-hmm. So what I tried to do in the book is the introduction and the conclusion are my words, my view. Mm-hmm. So the reader knows I'm not like others. I want to tell you exactly where I stand. But in between are the stories of the cases, the stories of the litigants, and Justice Thomas's own words. So you can judge for yourself. Is he the people's justice?
I love that because, look, he probably is the single most attacked justice, maybe of all time. I mean, this is somebody who the left has caricatured since his confirmation hearings.
Yeah, and I laid that out in the introduction. I talk about how he has been attacked because, people are afraid. He's brilliant. And he's an originalist. And if people read this book, and I hope your listeners will read this book, and I hope they will go on and review it and give me feedback, because I need to know, am I getting the message out? Am I telling the story the right way? And they'll see. They say his critics, and I document this, say he's an Uncle Tom and a traitor to his race. The book proves the opposite is true. They say he favors corporations over consumers. The book proves the opposite is true. They say he favors the rich over the poor. The book proves the opposite is true. And so if I can take an example, chapter 1 is about Suzette Kilo. Suzette Kilo is separated with her husband. She didn't have a lot of money. She was a paramedic. And she bought a house with a view of the river, but it was a rundown house. And she got a second job. She took correspondence courses, became a nurse, got a second job, put blood, sweat, and tears in that house, painted it Odessa pink. She loved it so much. And then, while this was going on, Pfizer Corporation, your listeners may have heard of them, partnered with the city of New London to take her house. To take her house away, to take her neighborhood away. Her neighbors had lived there 100 years. When their kids got married, they bought them houses in the neighborhood. This was a proud blue-collar neighborhood. And they tried to take her house away. And so she wasn't willing to give in. And she fought them, tooth and nail. And she got lawyers from the Institute for Justice, Scott Bullock, who they called Bull, and they took them on. And the book recounts the drama of them sleeping in some of the houses they were afraid would be bulldozed down the night before a court hearing, because they were afraid the city teamed up with Pfizer would want to affect their morale. Why was Pfizer taking this? They wanted to build a plant for their new wonder drug. You may have heard of it, what they called a wonder drug, Viagra. And they wanted to have
We've certainly never heard of it.
Never on this program. And they wanted to have an upscale mall. And they wanted to have upscale apartments and restaurants. And they wanted to run out this blue-collar neighborhood. This case went all the way to the Supreme Court. And the book recounts the drama at every step of the way. And at the Supreme Court, Suzette Kilo lost 5-4. One party, one amicus, asked that the court restore the original meaning. It was the NAACP. You want to know why? Because this principle, known as eminent domain, the Fifth Amendment says the government can take your property for public use. In a case called Berman, out of the fine city of the District of Columbia, the city took people's property. And Justice Thomas recounted that 97% of those people were black. Now, I want you guys to do something when we're done. I want you to go Google and see how many reports there are about Justice Thomas championing the poor and minorities.
Yeah, right.
And the kicker to this case is Pfizer came in, they leveled all those houses. 8 years later, Pfizer left. And on the ground where Suzette Kilo's house rested, it is now a field. And I took a picture and put it in the book.
Wow. It's an amazing story. But that's what I'm talking about, right? I mean, giving meaning and human elements to landmark eminent domain cases is something that's not done a lot in your profession. I mean,
that is really important. It's so much more compelling when you see it in those terms as opposed to just reading an opinion. For a very long time, I've been an admirer of Justice Thomas, and I'm just so pleased to see that people are trying to get the actual story of this man out there. And one of the things I think is he is probably the most and you won't get this from the press or the left's attacks. He's probably one of the most unbiased, critical thinking justices we may have ever had. He in college he was actually left wing. He had a conservative awakening. He's seen all sides. He's lived in incredible poverty, and made his way to the Supreme Court.
He voted for McGovern, right?
Yeah,
and he agreed with the philosophy of like Malcolm X.
Yeah,
right. And so like his philosophy is informed by his real world experience, just like the way he writes in these cases.
Well, I mean, that's such a brilliant insight on both your parts. I don't know that I hear that on other programs, but I definitely.
And having a potential Supreme Court justice call you both brilliant is something you ought to write down right now, because that will not
can we
happen
cut
again.
that out of the recording? They may question my judgment.
But that's coming up in confirmation.
Yeah, that is definitely coming up. But, his black nationalism that you all point to comes ringing through in this book. At one point when he's talking, he talks about historically black colleges and the importance they've served. And if you look at chapter 3, which is about the Grutter case, which is an affirmative action case, they talk about, I talk about a case out of Alabama. And it's Alabama State. And Alabama State's a historically black college, one of our proud historically black college institutions. And Justice Thomas captures this in his Grutter dissent. He talks about the importance of historically black colleges. And he gets to this, what he says in a separate case, not the quote's in the book, but the case is not, called Missouri v. Jenkins, is he says, it never ceases to amaze me that people assume anything that predominantly black is inferior. Mm. And that quote comes up in this Alabama State case where you're not going to believe it. They're trying to diversify a historically black college. And so they take away a scholarship from a black student, a black graduate student who is the plaintiff, and they give it to a white student because the scholarships are allocated based on your race by the court. And they're giving up what the plaintiffs called whites-only scholarships. And Justice Thomas points to these things, and he says, look at Morehouse. Look at these proud, historically black institutions. Like the one, by the way, back to Steph Curry, he does not make an appearance in the book. I wish I could have figured out a way to work him in. But not only is he doing Boone County Bourbon, but he's funding the golf program here at historically black Howard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yes.
And so, but Thurgood Marshall came from historically black Howard. So I think it's important that people read the book, give Justice Thomas a fair shake. I think they're going to be surprised by what you all just recounted.
Yeah.
His black nationalism that shines through. He's an originalist first. He always adheres to the original meaning. I challenge anyone to find where he hasn't. But then he never stops and just stops at the original meaning, which is what's so powerful about decisions. His decisions, he recognizes the real people in front of him.
It's just an incredible talent. I want to talk for a minute about one of the things I admire most about people like you, people like Justice Thomas, is, first of all, you're smarter than anybody I know, which is a terrific place to start. But like when you get to this level and you're able to do what it is that you do for a living, there's an incredible amount of lucrative stuff to go do in the legal profession. And yet there are people like you who decide to serve in these important appeals court, Supreme Court positions that push that away, even at a time when the left has politicized the courts to a point where you're going to be the subject of constant attacks. Can you talk to me a little bit about why you do this?
Yeah. That's a great question. Well, the first reason is because I heard you guys have a quota and you only let one Indian on the set, and you chose smug. So Ruthless 2 is giving up on quotas today and letting me in the studio.
He's penned a decision, and unfortunately we will have to abide by it.
So Justice Thomas, when he complained that he couldn't accomplish something, his grandfather who raised him said, "Old man can't is dead."
Yep.
You know how I know? I helped bury him. My dad, when I complained I couldn't do something, said, "This is the greatest country in the world. If you can't work hard and accomplish it here, you can't accomplish it anywhere." And it's that mentality, just the total appreciation by my parents for the opportunities this country gave them and gave their children. I mean, imagine that. They came here and English was a second language for them, but they thought, we want our kids to think. I don't know, how they thought like this, but we want our kids to think in English because every time someone talks to us, we have to convert it to Hindi and then convert it back to English and figure it out.
Yeah.
We don't want our kids to have that delay. How valuable was that for me as a trial lawyer?
No kidding.
To think in English. That's the way my parents thought because they wanted to give us every opportunity. The opportunities they didn't have. My dad grew up, he took us to his home, which he was proud of. It was a shack. He slept with his brothers and sisters on the dirt. I mean, he was the one kid, his mom, single mom. His dad died when he was 2. Single mom saves up for a one-way ticket and gives him the $5 left over and says, good luck. And he comes over here. So, I mean, I'm a kid who went to a naturalization and watched my dad become a citizen, and now I do the naturalization.
Yeah, that's a profound impact, I'm sure.
I've met with multiple presidents. I've been appointed 3 times, once to U.S. Attorney, once to the district court, and once to the circuit court. So President Bush made 2 mistakes and President Trump won in their appointments.
But you had a pretty good friend in the Senate that was taking care of some of those
nonetheless,
things.
yes. I think it didn't hurt to have certain people pushing you.
I think that is actually a very important point that you make is, I hope it's still the case, but there's a tradition almost among first-generation immigrants of fostering this sense of patriotism and appreciation that I think, sadly, you see in the mainstream public and the left's agenda of saying that America is a terrible country, it's a sinful nation that can't be, restored. And I think having judges and people who believe in this country, because its founding document is the Constitution, that your job in life is in understanding and interpreting that document. I think it's critical to have that sense of patriotism.
Yeah, and I think, I'm blessed to be on a great court with great colleagues, even some that think differently than me. They're like brothers and sisters, and we disagree like brothers and sisters, but I think we all fundamentally believe in the greatness of the country, or we wouldn't do the job.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right? If you don't believe in the Constitution, if you don't believe in the greatness of the country, you shouldn't be a judge. Mm-hmm. And I find that remarkable about my colleagues. And we just have it's such a unique opportunity for someone like me. And my parents luckily constantly remind me, and I remind my kids, and I hope everyone listening will remind their kids that this is the greatest country in the world. And all you got to do is travel to see it. Go to my dad's hometown and see where he came from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And he's so proud of it because, you're proud of where you're from. I'm proud of Toledo, Ohio. Mud Hens, Toledo.
And it takes a lot to be proud of Toledo.
I love it. Look, you've got listeners in Toledo, too.
Yeah,
You should be nice about my hometown.
If we can't make fun of everybody's everything, then, what are we doing here?
That's true, but I'd rather have you make fun of Ashbrook. He's the fellow Cincinnatian that doesn't show up for me.
Yes. No, that's absolutely right. Listen, you're a big sports fan.
I am.
I mean, you just watch everything?
I love the Bengals. I'm a season ticket holder.
There you go.
Nice.
You guys should come during the season. You're welcome to come to a game. I'm telling you, there's nothing better than a Bengals game. It's a ton of fun. Boone County is now going to have some stuff at the Bengals Stadium.
Nice.
I love the Reds. I boycotted the Reds for a while because their owner made some comments that I didn't love, saying, what else are you going to do? So I found something else to do.
Yep.
And I like watching golf because, golf's the one sport that we can all play. Not as well as them, but we can all play. Like, I can't play football.
Yeah, right.
You kidding? I get my... And I love sports because it truly is still a meritocracy.
Yeah.
Yep.
You
Yeah.
want to be good, prove it.
Well, you were saying your son picked up golf like 2 or 3 years ago and is now a collegiate golfer?
He's going to be, yeah. He didn't get his talent from my side of the family. Let's just leave it at that. His talent all comes from the other side of the family.
I mean, that must be some athlete.
Yeah, he is. But my wife's side of the family is pretty incredible.
Oh, man. Well, listen, your sense of humility, I think, is what distinguishes you and puts you on short lists for Supreme Court or something like that. Because at this stage, look, I got to imagine you're surrounded by a bunch of people who, when they get to this level, they know they're smart. And there's one thing to be smart, and there's another to act smart. And I think your point with Justice Thomas is something that you represented very well in yourself, and having a sense of humility and obligation to the people of this country while you're doing that job.
Yeah, I mean, I think Justice Thomas is a role model for all people. And I wish kids would read this book. I wish others would read this book just to see what he came up from and how he treats people. Mm-hmm. And I think we could all learn something from him. Here is one of the most important people in America. And yet, a homeless person, he's taking the time to show love and compassion to.
Yeah. Yeah.
And everywhere I go and talk about Justice Thomas, someone comes up to me and inevitably tells me a story of kindness. Just last night, a woman told me that one of her fellow parishioners, an older woman, got sick. Justice Thomas sent her flowers in the hospital.
Yeah.
Took the time to send her flowers.
It's just kindness. Absolutely. No, it's great stuff. Well, we're huge fans of you, but we've got 3 big questions where we'll be the ultimate judge of,
No.
of how great you
No,
really
we'll get
are.
to be the judge. Yeah.
So the first question, as you well know as a listener of the program, is if you can plan your last meal on Earth, what would it be?
Okay, so Smug's not going to like my appetizer. But my appetizer does not involve spaghetti. But it does involve chili.
Okay.
It's a coney, and the conies are delicious from Skyline.
Okay.
So that's my appetizer. Okay? Then I'm going to have the best steak in the world, cooked by my wife,
Yes.
who is an amazing chef.
I love that.
So she's...
Any particular cut are we working with here?
I want, you know what they call a cowboy steak?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, if it's my last meal,
Right.
I got to enjoy it.
Yeah.
A big tomahawk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to have a lot of Boone County bourbon because I'm not going to feel it the next day.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I want the record to show we did not break this bottle while I was on the set.
No,
we
we-
did not open it,
Which takes remarkable restraint. I might
especially
add.
because you put it by me.
Judicial restraint.
Yes. And then I'm going to have the best ice cream in the world, Grater's ice cream.
God, you
I
really
knew
are.
that was coming. I knew that was
That's a pretty
Cincy-
good setup.
Yeah.
Cincy guy through and through. You know, when a politician gives me that rap, I mean, like, come on. I'm always like, you got to be kidding me. This is like pandering to the constituency. You don't have that constituency.
Yeah.
I got lifetime tenure. I get
to be honest.
votes.
0 votes, and he still goes in that direction. Man, I
Yes.
love that. I love that. All right, so second question. If you never got into this line of work at all, never once a day in the law, and you can look back on your life with total clarity and retrospective with blue sky, and you can fill it with anything, what would it be?
Yeah, I've got one regret, and it is that I didn't serve the country in the military. My roommate from college is a 2-star general in the Marines now.
Wow, really?
Served his country.
You've been surrounded by some remarkable people, by the way.
Yeah, my wife being first among them. Honey, if you listen to the program, please note that.
And he's got a golf trip planned next week.
Yes, that's right. No, I'm not dunking.
Yes. I love it. Busting balls, too. This is great.
But, you know, I regret not having ever served. I looked at it multiple times, just being a reserve. I wish I would have pulled the trigger. And never did it. And shame on me for not giving the country back in that way. And if I couldn't do that, I'd be commissioner of the NFL or the PGA. And if either of them are looking, I'm just saying.
I know Moynihan's getting a little rocky over at the PGA.
That's
You might
right.
be able to figure out how to broker
Yeah,
that deal.
I don't know what's up with that. You
It is
know,
crazy,
leaving the
right?
players out high and dry.
Felt like Rory really got his legs chopped out from underneath him on that deal.
God, I felt bad for her.
Seriously. And then he almost wins the U.S. Open afterwards. So he must
know.
not be taking it too hard.
Well, that shows you what a remarkable talent he is.
Yeah.
Yeah, no
absolutely.
question about it. All right, so third question. I'm particularly interested in how you view this because you view it probably a lot differently than many people. But our view is that most successful people are motivated by one of two things: the thrill of victory or the agony of defeat. The thrill of victory is the self-motivated, glass half full optimist who's just sort of driven to try to do bigger and better things by themselves. The agony of defeat person is the Michael Jordan character. It's every victory that they've ever had, it lasts about 1 second of appreciation, and every slight, every setback, every thing that they have encountered that has prevented them from reaching a goal is the thing that they hold on to for motivation to overcome the next obstacle. On that spectrum, Judge, where do you find yourself?
I'm sadly an agony of defeat guy.
This
And
does not surprise me at all.
let me explain why. Because as an originalist, to come back to Justice Thomas, you view your job as to get it right. And when you can't convince your colleagues and you think you're right, you're harming the country, I think. You're harming the document, the very document that gave me all the opportunities. But throughout my career, I've been an agony of defeat guy. I remember every rejection. So let me give you one story. I know you want to get the show over with. Get me out of here.
All day. I'm more concerned with your time than ours. I literally would sit here for the next 6 hours. And talk to you.
Watch it. We might break that bottle open if we're here 6 hours. But the first time I applied to be a judge, I was a magistrate judge. The only merit-based position in the federal judiciary, mind you. And I was turned down. I made it to the finalists and was turned down.
Oof.
I never forgot that. I still remember the interview.
Yeah.
I still remember the feeling of rejection, you know?
And you know that dude's name too, don't you?
Oh, trust me, I haven't forgotten anything.
Totally.
But, you know, when you get rejected like that, it gets harder to do the next thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it was interesting to put in for U.S. attorney, knowing you could be rejected. Mm-hmm. It's really, really hard. But some things God calls you to do. I went, when we moved back home to Cincinnati, my wife's home, I thought, you know, President Bush had just offered me a job. I went home and said, honey, we had our first kid. She was pregnant with our second. I said, honey, I got great news. She said, honey, I got better news. I said, don't you want to hear my news? President Bush offered me a job, or, you know, the administration offered me a job. Not the president himself. He didn't even know who I was, but that's beside the point. And she said, can you do it from Cincinnati? Because we're moving home to Kentucky, to northern Kentucky. And so I thought, you know, I'm moving back. I'm going to go make money. I'm finally going to make money. My wife was happy. She married a lawyer.
Dad's going to be proud.
Yeah. Thought my dad would have been proud. That's right. And I was in Cincinnati working for a great law firm. And I boarded a plane on 9/11 to Los Angeles to take a deposition.
Holy smokes. I didn't realize that.
And we were in the air, and we got diverted to St. Louis. All the planes were ordered to land. We were on a 747. Back then, Cincinnati was a hub for Delta Airlines. Yeah. And we heard what was happening, because they used to have, all the young people don't know about this, but they used to have phones in the back of the seats.
Yeah.
And we took the phones out and heard what was happening. And me and the people around us talked about, if they were on our plane, we would do something about it.
Huh. Wow. You actually had to have that conversation?
Yeah.
Man.
And I vowed to the Lord, if we hit the ground, I was going to put my application in to be an AUSA and ask to hunt them down.
Oh,
wow.
Man.
And so on September 12th, I put in an application to be an AUSA, and it changed my life forever.
That is an incredible story.
Wow.
I didn't realize that was the ultimate motivation.
Here's the worst part of the story. I mean, what happened on 9/11 is awful. I just was up there thinking, what can I do to help? And there was nothing. Mm-hmm. Right? You're helpless. Mm-hmm. And so I knew when I got down, I had to do something about it.
Mm. That is fascinating. I mean, in a much
incredible
smaller capacity, I had a very similar deal. I was here at 9/11. I mean, it's the reason I got into politics.
Yeah, and it's the reason I'm sitting here today.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't be here. I believe so much in the fabric of this country, and I hope this book contributes. I hope it arms people with the real knowledge and the real facts. All my facts are endnoted and cited. Mm-hmm. You can go verify everything I say in there, because people aren't going to believe it. Mm-hmm. They're going to read it and not believe it.
If they're looking for errors in an Amul Thapar book, I'm not sure that's a wise move. We can't thank you enough for coming in. This is, like I said, we would love to just sit and pick your brain about the million issues that are confronting this country and their application to the Constitution and everything else. I will have to do it another day, because you got other appointments.
You got to come to Cincinnati, but and it's today is the first day the book is available.
That's right. It's today.
It's the People's Justice, and you can get it anywhere you get your books.
Anywhere you get your books. Please leave me a review. Send you guys a note. Let Let me know what you think. I'd love to know, am I communicating well? Am I getting the message out there? Am I arming you with the details, the listeners? Am I arming them with the details they need to know when they have those neighborhood cookouts and talk about Justice Thomas, that they can share these stories? Because in these stories, and by the way, as a teaser, there's a chapter where the victim of Bill Cosby sues to clear her name.
Wow. Yeah, I saw that.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean,
And-
just incredible.
Get the book, read it, and let me know what you think. Most importantly, let me know what you think.
Absolutely.
We have a lot of people that come on to pitch books. I'm doing the very rare. You got to go buy this.
Yeah.
You have
I'm
to
actually
read
reading
it.
this one. I had it ordered. And he was kind enough to bring me a copy, so now I got two.
I had.
Fantastic.
Did Smug tell you what's in his as the PS?
What's the inscription? What
Do you have it with you?
I have it right here.
Read the PS. If you can read my handwriting. I had to write the PS, but I couldn't put it in the message itself. It's on. They told me there's a signature page, so you
Yeah.
got to go about
Couple
four
more
pages
pages
in, past all the reviews.
There he
Oh
is.
my goodness, that's so nice.
Okay, so now look at the PS. Can you read it?
I absolutely knew that.
Yeah, see,
That's
I
a great
knew you
personal
knew
tip.
that.
Bourbon goes great with Indian food. A lot of folks don't know this, but that is the truth.
Yes.
I love that. That's
Yeah.
so good.
And you know what? My wife makes amazing Indian food. So if you guys come and do a show in Cincinnati, honey, you're making Indian food. It's an all-day affair.
Nice.
And we're drinking. I got plenty of bourbon.
Count me in.
I've made a list of all the promises that
lot
we
of-
get here.
Yeah, you better write it down.
The Indian food one I'm putting down now. So
And we'll get Grater's ice cream. My son scoops ice cream at Grater's at night. So
No kidding.
Nice.
Oh,
Yeah.
this guy is the best. We are lucky, beyond lucky, to have Amul Thapar sitting in the seat that he is. God willing, you get a shot at the Supreme Court someday, because all of us would benefit a great deal from your wisdom. Thank you, sir, for joining us.
Thank you so much.
thank you for having me. It's been a real treat and pleasure.